Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be here, but I'm also nervous to be here. And I'm nervous because this particular topic, cannabis, psychedelics, and neurodivergent well-being, is something that is special to me. So let me explain why I'm here. Yesterday, I was at, does anyone know who Mila Jansen is? Okay. So Mila is a woman. She's over 80 years old. Her 80th birthday was yesterday. And I was a guest there. I had a good time. I smoked a lot of chillum, like a lot of chillum. And I'm known for having big joints, 7-gram joints, which, you know, at some point, now that I'm 46, could be considered excessive. But I smoke cannabis, I make hash, and I grow cannabis because I need to. That's for my health. So whereas I was smoking a lot of chillum, and it was like, oh, Duchess smokes all the time. Well, there were like 1,000 people talking to me. And people talking to me makes me a little bit nervous all the time. And I know you, and do you remember me from this? And I'm like, I don't remember. Let me hide in the bathroom. So whereas there's a stigma often about those who seem like they're all put together, but who knows what's the war that they're dealing with, right? So, I was diagnosed with ADHD in 2009, and although I have not yet had my appointment for an autism diagnosis, let's just put it like this. If it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, it's a duck, okay? And so the accommodations that I have made in my life in the last 3 or 4 years have made me and my family a lot happier because, you know, sometimes I need headphones all the time. So these are, so I wish I could walk around. Oh God, I really don't like that. So, okay, so when we're dealing with ADHD in adults, when we're dealing with autism in adults, you know, right now we're seeing a lot on TikTok, you see it on Instagram, and people are like, oh, everybody has ADHD right now. But really and truly, a lot of us, especially those of us who are over 30, were not diagnosed when we were younger. I mean, I was diagnosed at 30 in 2009, but had I been diagnosed, maybe my life would have been different. But I have been using cannabis for my betterment, and these are some of the things that cannabis helps with. Okay, so we've got dopamine. These are some of the things that are affected by ADHD and autism. We have dopamine dysregulation. So we call it ADHD as if, oh my God, they just like no attention to anything. The truth of the matter, it's not that it's about no attention to anything. It's attention to all things until we find the exact thing. Then there's too much attention to that thing. And then there's no eating. And there's no going to the bathroom. And then there's no sleeping. And there's just at all times. And cannabis helps that. When we're dealing with the default mode network that is helpful with ADHD, you know, we find ADHD and autism. We have the overactivity in ADHD, distractibility, and whatever. And then with autism is the difficulty in shifting of attention, the rigid mindset. We have the glutamate and GABA imbalance that we're dealing with autism, and it impacts sensory processing, emotional regulation, and executive function, getting things done, and cortisol and stress response. So this is what we're dealing with. However, cannabis is super helpful with that. The ECS, which is the endocannabinoid system, regulates every single part of our body. Our breathing, our sleeping, everything is in some point impacted by the ECS. And the CB1 receptors, the CB2 receptors are both affected by the type of substances that we ingest, whether it's going to be cannabis, whether it's going to be hachís, which is going to be a much concentrated version, whether it's going to be psychedelics at different levels. Now, you will look online and there will be some studies that will show, you know, people are like, oh, I use cannabis for my ADHD. Well, cannabis can be fantastic because of THC's ability to increase dopamine and help with focus. If you find the right strain, right? Executive function. So here, right now, I did tell you I smoked a lot of chillum beforehand. Today, I had a tincture of 1-to-1 CBD to THC because I did want to be calm. I did not want to be super calm, but I did want to be calm, right? So it's not all about just the idea of whether cannabis or not, or psychedelics or not, but it comes down to the fact that we are all a pharmacy into ourselves and onto ourselves, and cannabis comes in literally tens of thousands of ways. It's an infinite number. Anyone who does mathematics, I did mathematics in college, anyone who does mathematics understands that just the sheer number of cannabinoids, sheer number of terpenoids, sheer number of volatile organic compounds, all of that in terms of multiplying each by each other will show you the many different cocktails that you can provide for your body. Emotional regulation, especially when you're dealing with someone like within autism, OCD, CBD modulates that cortisol release, reducing impulsivity and stress, which is an issue with neurodivergence. Understand that we're not trying to fix our neurodivergent brains. We're really just trying to find ways that we can be as healthy as possible and live our lives as happily as possible. Now, I can say, okay, just use some cannabis for that. The problem is sometimes we don't understand that cannabis, like every other medicine, is nuanced, right? So let's say I am hyper, I'm about to come here. There's no way, even if I didn't have that one-to-one, that I'm gonna do something like smoke super silver haze. Because super silver haze has an amazing way of making you sharp, but it's a little too sharp. So then you're just like, oh my God, I'm gonna talk, I'm gonna get up here, I'm gonna talk. And that's problematic. Whereas I could look at something like maybe a GMO, and that would be a little calmer, but then maybe I'm a little too relaxed, and I'm missing many parts. So when we're dealing with any kind of substance, whether it's gonna be cannabis, hashish just being a concentrated version of such, then we have to understand what we're putting in our body and not just use a template of ideas of, well, just use some cannabis for it. You would never walk into the pharmacy and just pick up something because it's a box. I have a headache, let me just pick that up, it's a box. It seems like medicine, so I'm gonna take that. We would never do that, and yet we do take that same standpoint when we're dealing with cannabis, like cannabis is going to save everything. As someone who's a huge proponent of cannabis, a huge advocate, I can say that that in itself is super detrimental, because when you find a person who tries just one thing and it doesn't work, then suddenly it's like nothing ever worked. And it's not until we understand the way our bodies are, our minds and our bodies are needing these medicines, that we can understand how to create the formulations that are best for us. So with regard to autism symptoms and relevant and cannabis, sensory processing and anxiety is a big issue within, I'm not talking about autistic children, though this applies, but for autistic individuals. So again, I was at Mila's party yesterday. I was at Mila's party, and it was so much fun, and I was seeing people I haven't seen in years, some of them 5, 6 years, and I just wanted to leave. It's like, Duchess is here, and I just wanted to go because I was overwhelmed by the amount of people touching me and how loud the air was, and it got cold at a certain time, and the food was funny, and they had this weird texture that I was freaking out about, and at the same time, it was just keep it together, and that keeping it together is masking. Now, masking can be very, very helpful in certain situations, but I have found it to be very detrimental in my life, because masking prevents us from truly discovering who we really are. So besides the, in a way, physical components that we find with this medicine, the way we can change the way our neurotransmitters are released and such like that, we also have a metaphysical responsibility to ourselves to be as good to ourselves as possible. And when we're dealing with living life in a way that is for somebody else, what somebody else will expect, oh, Duchess, you're supposed to be just together and not hiding in the bathroom. No, I'm hiding in the bathroom because when I was in the 6th grade, I hid in the bathroom too. You know what I mean? Y'all know me now, but I hid in the bathroom too because I was so overwhelmed at that time. So what we find is that CBD is especially helpful for people on the autism spectrum, whether you're doing a 1-to-1 of CBD to THC all the way up to 20-to-1 CBD to THC, which really, really helps with repetitive behaviors, that helps with ruminating thoughts, all types of things that make life unbearable for many people. That is not nearly as obvious to everybody else. Sometimes people's disabilities are not very, very very obvious. So then when you have someone who has autism and also has ADHD, and so we have impulsivity, and we also have social anxiety, and we have all kinds of anxieties, and we have gastrointestinal problems and all of that, one of the most or least toxic ways we can address that is with cannabis and also with psychedelics, which has an even less chance of you dying. Again, no one has ever died from cannabis and no one has died from psilocybin. So one of the things that's interesting is that like we talk about cannabis and we talk about the health, but we never really talk about the people who indulge in cannabis the most. And my friend, Dr. Miyabi Shields, has come up with this idea called the stoner neurotype. If anyone is interested, really interested in science, Dr. Miyabi Shields, just ridiculously important endocannabinoologist. And the stoner neurotype is the people who are smoking more than, I think, 3 grams a day. And it's the whys behind that. So Miyabi did a study, and it was over the course of maybe a month and a half, there were about 4,000 participants. 73 of the people who participated in the study who were considered heavy users were neurodivergent. And it wasn't a causality situation, or the correlation really was the people who were considered needing most of the alleviation of the stress of cortisol, anxiety, and such like that, found themselves to be self-medicating with cannabis and other substances as well, mainly cannabis and psychedelics. So these people find themselves often outside of the traditional healthcare systems. Like said myself, I haven't been diagnosed as yet. This line is really long in New York to get diagnosed for autism. However, I do recognize that a steady routine coupled with cannabis first thing, something low dose in the morning, makes the rest of the day move. Not the rest of the day sleeping, or the thought that we have about cannabis users like they're just lazy or whatever like that. No, things that have people throwing conferences and events and teaching. And my big issue when we talk about cannabis often is that it comes down to business. And even though cannabis business is a big deal, there are 219 million people right now who are considered cannabis users in the world. They're not 219 million businesses. So for me, it's not about commerce, it's about the day-to-day. And the day-to-day is for me, is harm reduction and the reduction of pharmaceuticals to manage many different comorbidities. How much time do I have, Libby? Okay, so real quickly. So again, we can't just say, hey, I have a nug in my bag, just smoke something and you'll be great, right? When we find the different types of terpenes, like myrcene and linalool is gonna be calming. Pinene and CBD is gonna enhance focus. Limonene and THC is gonna be stimulating, but it might make you feel like crazy. So high frequency consumers make their own things. Speaking about Miyabi wakes up and mixes CBG with a little bit of THC with a little CBD to be able to function and like not pick their hair all day long or talk incessantly, and also get their work done. And for me, someone who eats clean, who tries to get enough sleep and tries to get away from as many chemicals as possible, something like cannabis is a lifesaver, literally. Like, lifesaver, because depression kills. Depression kills, social anxiety kills, and if I'm gonna stay home for days on end, not bathing and not eating, best believe I could use a joint, and I don't care about the stigma that comes with it. With psychedelics, really quickly, the thing about psychedelics that really, really helps in terms of ADHD and autism is the fact that psychedelics, again, for one, lower the activity of our brain just moving so much, especially on the level of microdosing. Macrodosing has a different connotation. However, the day-to-day is microdosing psychedelics of LSD, microdosing mushrooms. I myself am a mushroom person. Being able to have a release of serotonin that makes me feel better throughout the day, being able to get stuck out of those rumination loops of like, did I do it? Did I do it? Why did I do it? Did I do it? That's one of the things that happens with ADHD also. Psychedelics is amazingly good, and it comes down to dosing. It comes down to whether you're trying to see divinity or you're just trying to make it through the door. And for the average person, and several of my friends are neurodivergent, we do nothing without having some sort of psychedelic psychedelic plan that goes hand in hand with our cannabis consumption. And that makes life happen very, very well. So I say this being vulnerable, like I'm interested in this, even though I'm known as a grower, I'm known as a hash maker, I'm known as someone who's all about the good life. But the good life sometimes is waking up and being able to face the rest of the day without dreading it. And depression is killing a lot of us. So that's all I wanted to have. Thank you very much.